Okay, hello everyone. This is CounterYolo, bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the Tier 6 Karfi Battle Carrier. It's got a different name than that, but that's what our new winter ship is for this year. I'll briefly go over its base stats, why I'm not going to go over its comparisons to other ships of its subclass, because it's not really in its own real subclass. It has its own weird things with it. We'll compare it versus the other Fek'Ihri starships, and then versus the other carriers as well inside the game. The one that I consider kind of the closest in real comparisons to this thing. Then we'll quickly go over the trading console and why you want to use one or the other, and then of course the TLDR at the end of the video. Feel free to see the time links in the description or in the time bar at the bottom of the screen. When it comes to this starship, one big thing to keep in mind, the Karfi Battle Carrier was one of the first carriers originally made inside this game. It was made during a time where carriers had to have commander science. I mean, we already had the Vokuv, and Cryptic wanted to have a bit more of a energy-based starship. And so what they did was they made a new science carrier that had a much more offensive tactical bridge offshore layout. And they gave it an extra weapon over regular carriers that only had 6 weapons. Of course, if you also look back in the day during this time, this was prior to Delta Rising, prior to the Dyson Science Destroyers as well, so science ships didn't have secondary deflectors either. So it didn't feel terrible to go on an exotic-based build with a starship like this either. Nowadays, it's quite a bit different. It feels pretty bad to go very much in an exotic-based playstyle with a starship like this without a secondary deflector. But it is what it is right now with science carriers that have 2 hangar bays. They just don't get a secondary deflector. That being said, its base stats are still basically the same as the old Tier 5 Karfi Battle Carrier. Again, it's got a different name. They took off the battle on the carrier, but that's what this ship is. It's got a Lieutenant Commander Tactical, and on that seat, it's got Command. And this is a big improvement over the last one that didn't have any special station seating. It means that this is clearly supposed to be a torpedo-based build, which means, especially versus last year's Tier 6 Fek'Ihri carrier that had 5 tactical consoles and Lieutenant Commander Miracle Worker. Clearly, this year's vessel is supposed to be torpedo-based. Last year's is very much supposed to be the energy-based carrier for the Fek'Ihri. With the Tier 6X upgrade, you get an extra universal console there. When you look at other science carriers, none of the other science carriers in the game have 7 weapons on them. The Fek'Ihri carrier and its Tier 6 new version now are the lone exceptions that have commander science and actually have 7 weapons. All the rest of them in the game will only have 6. Again, as I said with the historical lesson thing here, that's why the Fek'Ihri carrier was made. And in my opinion, the reason why we have Dreadnought carriers today is because of the appeal of the Karfi Battle Carrier. And that basically evolved into what is now the Dreadnought carrier subclass in the tactical side of starships. Here's the base stats for the recent support carriers that came out that also have Lieutenant Commander command. So in that sense, for a torpedo-based build, they're very similar. But also keep in mind these ships are down 1 tactical console. If you had the Tier 6X on that, it'll be an extra universal alongside that. So from an offensive standpoint, this new event starship is going to be a better DPS platform, at least from a torpedo standpoint, than these support carriers. In terms of raw starship comparisons, here's our Fek'Ihri carriers, our old Tier 5X Karfi Battle Carrier, and then our 2 Tier 6 variants of it. The spiritual successor in the Fereng, which, as I said, in my opinion, the battle carrier was the precursor to what Dreadnought carriers would eventually become. So this is the spiritual successor, and then we have our literal successor now in this year's Fek'Ihri carrier. Looking at them, Lieutenant Commander Science Miracle Worker, Lieutenant Commander Tactical Command. This is a ship that has very little science, and its science you can replace with Miracle Worker. Our new starship here, if you actually want to go full on torpedo based, you have to make the Lieutenant Commander Universal here tactical, which, I mean, considering that the old Fek'Ihri Battle Carrier had Lieutenant Commander Tactical and Lieutenant Tactical, you'd still be going in the same spirit of how the old ship was, which I think is still perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable. Base stats otherwise are pretty much the same, and you just have a new Coda skin on it. I don't think the Federation will have access to the old Tier 5 skin until, of course, things eventually get unlocked for all factions in the game at some point in the near future. Again, torpedo platform, energy platform, whatever platform. But it's OG and it feels nice to play an OG starship. All right. When it comes to other science carriers, again, science carriers normally only have 6 weapons. The Fek'Ihri Battle Carrier is the exception. It's Tier 5 and Tier 6 variant. Again, the Volkuv is another Lieutenant Commander Command starship. I think that our Fek'Ihri Battle Carrier is just better. We also have the Lockbox Flying Dragoon, which is a Miracle Worker science carrier. Because of its pets and such, it is very strong as a nanny boat for a lot of those that really want to do that. That's fallen a little bit out of favor nowadays, and we oftentimes just prefer to just have tanks now. But you know, you can do what you will in the game. When it comes to other science carriers, of course, we have the Gemidar ones. Quite often when we talk about stars in the game nowadays, the Gemidar Vanguard starships really are highly favored, just because if all the starships in a pack are basically the exact same, well, might as well pick the one that has a wingman mechanic to give you additional extra passive damage effectively in combat. So that is where these come from here. We have one for the Sea Storm, one from the fleet. And when it comes to Dreadnought carriers, looking at it, actually, funny enough, the Lockbox Gemidar Dreadnought carrier actually has some pretty good similarities, frankly. I mean, you're basically just flipping your engineering and tactical seat here with that command. Of course, both those seats are command here. I'll talk about in a little later video this month on how to fix some of the issues with some of these older starships. But great base stats on this old ship. It's also got the Gemidar fighters and frigates available to them. If you own a Tier 5 or Tier 6 strike ship or recon ship, and because of that, there is a lot of appeal with these ships. The Tier 5 and Tier 6 variants of this were some of the classic tanks for a lot of people on STO Reddit as well. So there is some of that appeal as well. I'm just someone who personally prefers carriers, so or like not carriers, but I prefer cruisers. So that's what I typically fly. Flight deck carriers are, I guess, the exception to that. Anyway, the Lockbox Sarcophagus, we'll talk about its console later with our new ship. Both of these ships' consoles seem, at least thematically, very similar. So it's something to think about. The Sarcophagus has one of the highest base HPs in the entire game as well, and it's also a Lieutenant Commander Command. So it is another very strong, decent platform for torpedo builds too. It's also one of the better tank platforms as well if you're going for really high hull HP. Again, you're down, you don't have cruiser command, so you can't rely upon that. You're going to have to go much more on the DPS side of things to keep your threat on you. And has really, really horrible base stats otherwise in terms of maneuverability, because, well, there's the promo Dreadnought Carrier, the Her Dreadnought Carrier, which has much higher base stats there. Now, it's Commander Engineering instead of Commander Tactical, but I mean, also a Fek'Ihri Battle Carrier is also a 7-weapon carrier with Commander Science, so there is definitely that there. In another way of looking at it in terms of starships, our new event starship is almost like a trial run for, like, hey, are you thinking about buying the Zenkethi Zentar either from promo packs or you know, waiting for a low buy sale and for it to show up for a limited time in the low buy store, well, fly the new Tier 6 Garfy Battle Carrier and see if you like it. Because a lot of the maneuverability here is fairly similar. Its base stats are fairly similar as well. Just a little bit higher hull and lower shields instead of higher shields, lower hull. And this ship just doesn't have a commander worker, while this one does. And it has another extra console besides the American Worker console. So if you're someone who's thinking about the Zenkathi Zentaur, but aren't willing to go for it, earning this ship and then flying it for a while, you should be able to get at least a relative feel that should be similar to the Zenkathi Zentaur. And if you think it's good enough to purchase for one character, then you definitely can get the Zentaur. If you earn the Fek'Ihri ship during the event, then you have it for your whole account too. So there definitely is that plus as well. When it comes to the trade and the console, as I've mentioned in other winter and summer events, these things are meant more to be fun and have flair with them than to actually be practical. With that said, the console, if you look at the base stats of the multi-target tractor arrays, it seems very similar to that console. It gives you flight speed, gives you a little bit of passive fire damage, as well as it launches out some flaming chains at enemies. That deals massive fire damage, how much that actually is, as you ram into the enemy. If this scales with EPG and control like multi-target tractor arrays does, then this could be a potent console anyway for a lot of your exotic-based builds. Otherwise, it's going to be another fun console. But then again, when it comes to budget builds, if you've earned the other Fek'Ihri starships, the new starship trade, Grithor's Weapons, launching hangar pets gives you additional fire damage on your weapons. Now, I don't know if this affects torpedoes as well as regular energy-based weapons. We'll have to see with experimentation. I'm sure Augie and Timberwolf and all those other guys and people on Reddit will figure that out pretty quickly. And in terms of how valuable this trade is. Because the other consoles from the previous Fek'Ihri starships have also given passive fire damage to your starship, if you have all those consoles and you don't have many other great starships and traits otherwise, it could be a decent filler starship trait, frankly. Or if you only have this year your first tier 6 starship in the game, considering that most of the other free traits in the game are pretty abysmal when it comes to extra damage for your starship, this is probably going to be one of the better starship traits available to you. Granted, after the event's over, this is going to probably be a starship trait that's not worthwhile to get. I mean, I could definitely be wrong, and this could scale super well and be super OP or something, but I really don't see it. I see it more as a fun additional filler trait for those of you that are looking at more budget-based builds. That being said, as I've talked about, actually, I'm not sure if I actually talked about on the channel. When it comes down to budget builds, and there's a video on that. It's one of the most popular on my channel, funnily enough. Budget builds are really, really strong with 2 hangar bays, especially if you are willing to get superior area denial alongside it. You can legitimately have your hangar pets be your DPS when it comes to normal and advanced difficulty. At elite difficulty, you want more than just hangar pets for sure. But at normal and advanced difficulty, your hangar pets can be enough for you. I think that's why we've gotten so many carriers over the past couple of years. Now, granted, 2 years ago, it wasn't a carrier, it was the Fek'Ihri Warship, which is another video on the channel. I actually was doing videos back then. Feels weird. But then again, Timberwolf's going to be passing 10,000 subs soon on YouTube, so there is definitely that as well. Anyway, when it comes to TLDR, TLDW, we have a new Tier 6 Fek'Ihri Battle Carrier. It's earnable through the winter event, and it's accessible to the Federation captains as well. Keep in mind, the unique pets from the Tier 5 Carpet Battle Carrier can only be used if you have that, which means only KDF captains can access those fancy pets. The pets that come with this ship, the Lost Souls of Grethor, don't get the advanced or elite versions. The basic versions actually are the best DPS version, just as an FYI. Keep in mind, with recent things that have happened inside of the game, I'm just going to make this warning, and hence why I decided to put this meme poster on the slide. Not even really that far into the future, a lot of us now are expecting the restrictions on Federation and Klingon starships that the other faction can't access them to be removed in the very near future. We're expecting whenever the KDF legendary starships drop, whether it's piecemeal and it's like one after another in the future, or if it's actually a big bundle like we're all wanting. We're guessing that because KDF ships just don't sell well because there's not enough players to fly them. A lot of us are guessing that either at the official announcement of that or shortly thereafter, within a few months, Cryptic will make it so that Federation captains can at least fly KDF starships. And then alongside that, Klingon captains ain't been able to fly Federation starships. There will still be those exceptions, like there's the ones that whenever it's from a lockbox, there's a couple of sets of them where you have to pick the one for your faction, so those ones will probably still be restricted, unless of course they get rid of loot boxes, which is, I guess that might actually be a possibility because we haven't gotten a loot box within the past couple of weeks, which is kind of expected at this point. Funny enough, maybe we'll actually get the loot box pretty soon. Yeah, a lot of us are expecting that restriction to be removed in the near future. Definitely at least probably by summer or fall next year, which would drastically change the game, as Cryptic has been hinting at for a while, or at least I think Boardicus is the one that was hinting at that. One of those bigger people that have been around for a long time in the game have been hinting that the game's going to drastically change. That's how I'm expecting it to change, is for Federation and Klingon captains to basically be able to fly their opposite faction starships. But yeah, the big thing for this starship, sorry, I went on a rant there. The big thing for this starship is that it's a 2-hangar carrier, and it's tier 6, which means for those of you that are more budget players, this is going to be a strong ship for you, especially if you don't have a tier 6 starship yet. Of course, if you have a flight deck carrier, maybe it might not be as good for you, because flight deck carriers generally just really, really great in general inside the game right now. But otherwise, if you don't have a tier 6 starship yet, this is a solid starship. You want to do moderate exotic DPS, it's going to be fine. If you want to do torpedo DPS, it's still going to be great. If you want to do energy DPS, not quite as strong, but it's got 6 tactical consoles and it's got 7 weapons, so it's not going to be super bad. And also, because it's only 7 weapons instead of like 8, you don't have to worry about cooldown management and weapon power cost reduction as much on a starship like this one. So there's definitely a lot of things going for it. But anyway, please stay safe and healthy. Especially, because a lot of people travel during Thanksgiving, and so people are more likely to probably be exposed to things like COVID than they were previously. And there was a reasonable uptick in the past month or so. So please just stay safe. Do what you feel is reasonable for you. I'm not going to tell you, you must do this, you must do that. No. Like, do what is reasonable for you. And hey, if you ain't burned out by life, like, try something different. Like, we don't want you, to get super depressed and things. Everyone is going through trying times right now, monetarily, and what else. So, do what is good for you. If you don't feel that you can put in the time to, get this new starship, then don't worry about it. There also were a couple of sorry I didn't mention this. There were a couple of new kit stuff and vanity things for ground combat. None of them really sounded particularly appealing. Some of them might be super good, but I'm not really too worried about it. So yeah, sorry that I didn't cover that in the video. I had, what, like an hour and a half to fully make the slideshow presentation for this and record it before I got back to work, because I'm taking a little bit of time off in order to do this. So just be grateful that you have the video. Anyway, thank you all for watching. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and week.